Welcome back, wonderful listeners and viewers. We are here with Lisette again, kind of finishing up the last few questions of her interview, and she's been very open and very gracious about her experiences from now to when, from even to when her family first integrated here in the 70s. So my next question kind of gets in, to what perspectives is kind of all about. Kind of hearing, throughout your life and now as an adult, what has been some of your experience with racism and prejudices? I can't talk right now. Prejudices.
See, I'm not even gonna try someone. Prejudice.
Prejudice. That's a blooper, but I
don't know what we mean.
Yes, they know what we mean. I think we should definitely keep that in. Yes. So
yes.
How has that? Especially since we just did the extra footage talking about your faith and how you really see your faith is evolving into you being kind of a social justice leader, you using your faith. And so just really want to hear about what has been your experience around racism here in Chicago or anywhere else that you may have traveled or been.
Yeah, it's such a heavy question. It's the only way to kind of describe it. But I think it comes to play a lot when I think back, because I didn't have the phrase microaggressions growing up, and being a first generation Mexican American, you're always kind of in between cultures, right? You're in between this culture that is the United States of America, and then you have your Mexican, culture and what that all entails, and then you have these two languages that are running through your brain all day long, and you're kind of figuring out, and then you're forgetting words and you're forgetting phrases in one language, but know them in the other language and things like that. But I remember one of the first few things I remember hearing growing up was, "Oh my gosh, you speak English so well."
Wow.
And it was supposed to be a compliment. Right. I didn't know any better growing up. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice. Like, I didn't second guess it. I didn't think too much about it. But it was like a consistent thing. Like, you would speak in English and it'd be like, oh my God, you speak it so well. And after a while, you're just like, well, how else am I you're just kind of like, how else am I supposed to speak it? Because it's the language that I have to speak in this country to get by. Versus Spanish, like I struggled with it, because it wasn't, after a while, it isn't the dominant language that you're speaking. It was my first language at some point, but once you hit elementary school, you're speaking English practically all day, and you're doing it, you're only speaking Spanish with your parents around it. But that was, I think, one of my first experience when it came to, those microaggressions and sort of, that subtle racism that is, and then also like the thing of like, oh, you don't act like most Mexicans is another thing I heard growing up. But what was interesting was I had people also tell me, like, your parents don't seem like those Mexicans that you would expect, because they they would ask me like, oh, I would say, oh, they're from Mexico City, and I'm talking within like either other Mexicans or other like Latinos, and they're like, oh, but they don't act like you expect someone, or they don't speak like what you would expect someone from Mexico City to speak like, which is interesting itself, because it's also another form of like racism and microaggressions within your own community. And and I never knew how to respond to that, because I was like, it's just so weird. So I never quite ever addressed it. And I still, I think to this age, don't really know how to address. I was like, I don't know what to say when someone says like, well, your mom doesn't speak, it doesn't seem, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you about that. I was like, what do you expect them to act or be like? So I think those were some things that I think I readily kind of remember and understand around, just race and racism. And I remember one thing, and this was something I wrote a college essay on, and I can't remember what the question was, and I don't remember the class, but it stuck to my mom in my mind because my mom actually found my paper one day, like what I wrote. Because I kept everything from college, all my essays and everything. I kept them, like all the paper copies.
Hoarder. You're such a hoarder.
A hoarder, whatever. So my mom found it one day as we were kind of cleaning out, and I remember she said she read it, and it was an instance. So my mom, for a very long time, cleaned houses and offices, and sometimes I would go help her. Particularly when I was in college, and I would go help her, or I'd sometimes take her and just stay and help her as well. And I remember I was helping clean, and I do the simple things because I don't have my mom's work ethic to the extent that she has it. I'm not gonna lie. So she always made me do like the simple things, like empty up the little garbage cans and like dust, like all these like little things that she knew I'd be okay doing without supervision. So I remember I was emptying the garbage can. It was in an office, and this lady said something about like just like my mom or something, and I don't remember the exact words that she said, but I remember saying something like, she said something like, oh, these Mexicans are just cleaning, and like, oh man, they're just in the way, and like in a very like ugly tone, and in a way that she was trying to demean and just sort of, and she said it thinking that I didn't speak English. And so my introverted won that day, and I didn't want to respond to it because I was like, you know what? I also, like, I can't put my mom's job on the line either. Like, it's more than just me just responding, and there's a lot to that. But it stuck with me because I was like, man, they really thought that I wasn't going to understand them, right? And there's that notion from, it was a white lady there, and, the notion that, well, they all aren't going to understand English, and you can just talk about them with them in front of you, and not have to think about it, right? And just be like, whatever. And it was just one of those things that stuck with me, and I remember my mom was like, it's like, why didn't you ever tell me about that incident? I was like, because it wasn't important. I didn't want to give it relevance to anything, because it was just some dumb person saying some stupid thing and just being mean for no reason. And I didn't, and I also didn't want to respond because it's like, there's consequences that could happen, and I wasn't going to put that on the line either for you. And it was just one of those instances where, I was probably like 19 at the time when that happened, that started shaping a little bit more of my mindset of what, race and racism kind of plays into it, and I think that was one of the first kind of like actual, like, man, people are just mean for no reason. Like, I'm over here just cleaning your office, trying to make sure you don't get no bugs, and like, like this whole sense of like, how is it that because you have this position that you think you're better than the person that's just picking up your garbage or just vacuuming, and it definitely made an impact for me. And I remember I continued, like, I had no shame, like I continued helping my mom go clean some houses and like things like that, because I was like, hey, if I can, I'll do that, or if you need me, or I'll take you and I'll wait for you, and things like that. But to know that there's, to understand that there's people out there that just are going to say things to just say it because they think that they can. It's unfortunate because, you kind of see that around that. And I think, understanding that, no matter what you do, and, I think for me, no matter what you do, and, at the time, I was a DePaul student, like I was proud of that. Like, hey, like I'm going to a really good university, I'm getting this, but just because you look a certain way they can't see past that. And that's the first thing that people are going to look at and judge you by. And I think that experience is what hit home to me. Was like, I was like, man, no matter what I do, no matter how many titles and credentials I get next to my name, this is what they're going to see first. And that's what they're going to judge you by, regardless of what you do outside of that, and then it's unfortunate that, it rung true 50 years ago, it rings true today, and it'll ring true for, I would say, a few more, decades maybe. Like, I don't, we don't know how long this fight goes, but it's definitely those are probably some of the things that that come to mind when I think about racism. And I think there's a lot more to delve into when I think about racism. I think just in Chicago, and I think that Black and brown tension that we recently experienced in Chicago, but it's not new. I think it's something that's always been there. It's not unique to Chicago. I think it's something that happens across the country, because we've been sort of placed into thinking that we are too different to coexist, and and we're too different to work together, and there's the immigrants are coming in and taking our jobs, that narrative of that, and the idea that one is better than the other, deserves more than the other, and like we can't even live in the same block. Like, that shouldn't be possible. Like, the whole idea of it, I think, when I think about just Chicago in general, and how, I know we've talked about this in other videos, how segregated it is, and to see it as an adult now, is sort of like, man, like, what can I do? Like, what is my role within that, breaking down those walls? And it's daunting. I mean, I see a lot of organizations that are popping up throughout, I think, the Southwest area that are trying to figure that out. But that also brings its own, I think COVID brought its own kind of thing, because then everybody now has to be this rapid response into everything, and you kind of lose a little traction into like building that Black and brown unity, or just unity among just everybody. I think it's also important. But those are some of the things that kind of come to mind. And I think, we can delve into sort of even within Latinos, what racism and prejudices kind of exist even within our Latino community, which is interesting in when you kind of think of what white supremacy and its impact has had across the world, and see it play out within people who have similar sort of histories, and things like that. But I'll kind of just see if there's anything that you want me to expand on.
Oh, there's so much. And I don't want to divulge too much, because the last part of this installment or series that Lisette and I are doing on interviews, after we finished interviewing with each other, the third part of this, we're going to spend some time talking about the Black and brown relations, and why is there so much tension? Where's this tension coming from? And we keep hearing this word like white supremacy, like this suppression that stemmed down from white people. We know that's most of it, if not all, the reason why. But I think really kind of, while we have a little bit of time here, asking you, your experience with the Black and brown relations here in Chicago. Have you ever been confronted by someone, or or know someone that has been in an issue with, someone who is Black? Or even, I think, and I want to divulge more into this as well, maybe not particularly here, but just kind of put it out there. For me, coming here to Chicago, as I mentioned, growing up, it was just, Black and white people. I came to Chicago, and we have a whole group of brown folks. And for me, I'm so excited about that because I love learning about new people, new cultures, heritage, and to hear not only from yourself but other friends of mine who are Latinx and so forth. Basically, like, oh, there's a lot of tension between the different ethnic groups. And I think that's so fascinating because that's, to me, like I said, I'll be honest, like I was ignorant about that fact. I had no idea that there was tension between, like, if you're from this country versus another country, or even just within the Mexican community, like versus like skin color, the type of hair. I was just like, this has all been just fascinating to me. But if you want to elaborate on any of what I just touched on, I know that's a lot.
And that's how we do things. You and I are like, we can't do small. We gotta go big.
I know, it's just, oh my God.
And there is, I think to those watching, like, if you understand like anything that we're going through, these are big concepts, big issues. They're not little, and they didn't happen overnight, and nothing's gonna change overnight either. But I think one of the things that you kind of reminded me about as you talked about like the Black and brown tension was definitely seeing it play out during elementary school and high school. And I think more so like elementary school, I had some experiences of just, people just, like Black kids just saying, mean things to, the other Mexican kids. I think most of us were Mexican in my classes for the most part. And it would just be like, you would say something funny, like with an accent maybe or something, and it just, escalate into something. And I think that's the thing. I think that was one of the things that kind of stuck with me, of just, I think that's why I worked hard to make sure that my English was as perfect as it could be, because I was like, oh my, I don't want to be made fun of for my English, for having whatever. And I think a lot of, first generation or even, immigrant kids, want to ensure that they can speak it, or there's those that, come to the point where you just embrace that accent, or you just work with it and you make it work. But I think there was this sense for me, from my parents, of like, you have to speak English as perfect as possible, because we don't want you to have that struggle, because that was a point of contention, I would say, with some of the, the Black kids, or just a point of, they can make fun of you, right? And it sticks with you, and it creates this sort of barrier of like, as a kid, where it's like, oh, they're gonna make fun of me, so I don't gotta relate to them. I don't have to respect me. And to see something as simple or as little as that to kind of create, the tension. And I think just, culturally, I think that also plays a big part into it. There's a big cultural difference between, Black and brown communities. But there's also a lot of similarities, which I'm surprised we don't talk about similarities more often. We always kind of look at the differences. And that's something that you and I will probably talk on, as you mentioned, in some of those in the later videos that we'll hopefully be able to, for you all to see. But I definitely, and I think about just in general how Chicago is, you have these areas where they're predominantly Latino, predominantly Black. And they didn't just happen, they were designed to be that way. And the idea of, integrating these communities and doing it, like, that doesn't cross people's mind. I think, you look at what recently happened here in Chicago, and you understand, like, we're just trying to protect our own community. And by their own community, they mean their other, whether it's Mexican or Latinos, that's who they mean. They don't mean their neighborhood. They don't mean, like, we're trying to protect, all of Little Village. Not like we're trying to, and it's the sense of, like, your community is more of who you identify racially versus where, who lives in what your community and your neighborhood is made up of, which is such an interesting sort of concept, now that I kind of spoke it out loud, to think about, like, when, most people say, like, oh, my community, they're probably talking more about, like, those who identify as either Mexican or other Latino, ethnicities and stuff. So I think there's just so many layers to it that it's just hard to sort of pinpoint. And I think it's where that, from my, like I said, like my experience, I think I see it more, as I was younger, and where it kind of started for me to see that, and you kind of just see it, and I think, culturally, I think there wasn't a lot of conversations about, Afro Latinos growing up, and there wasn't a lot of representation in, in the TV shows and the novelas and the news reporters. I think there wasn't that representation.
That's the whole topic. Woo!
But it plays into this sort of, like, even that tension within our own Latinx community, like, that all plays into it. That whole sense of, representation matters. We talk about, like, oh, representation matters, in the broad, nation as the United States, but it also matters within your own sort of race and your own sort of, because there are different skin tones when it comes to, even if I just talk to the Mexican perspective, there's so many skin tones within the Mexican, but you only see those really white complected, blonde hair, individuals, more so than you see any darker person. And I think, it's one of those things where if it's not there, you're not going to realize that there's just this whole, skew of, this whole sort of representation that needs to happen that hasn't happened. And I think that creates even racial tensions within your own race, which is just sad and unfortunate that, we're sitting here talking about how within, our own communities, there's still that, colorism, and things like that. And it's just unfortunate to kind of talk through. And now I'm wondering if I don't even know if I touched on everything I
don't even know, but I'm just over here because this is your time to talk. And I've been kind of holding it in from just people making fun of your accents and the way you talk. That's shitty. Even though I know children are children, but they learn it from somebody. They get that from somewhere. And then hearing, like, this proximity to whiteness, it's just, and then hearing that, like, from you, I think you said earlier, like, hearing from other Mexicans that, like, oh, I didn't know you were Mexican. Oh, well, you don't sound Mexican. You don't act Mexican. I'm like, really? I don't know, but that's also, the same thing. Obviously, same thing with, Black people. And it's just like, oh, there's, like you said, there's so many layers to this. But I think that's a really good transition into the last question that I'm going to pose to Lisette. So we will be back, and stay tuned. And remember to subscribe and provide comments.
Yes, please. Bye.
Right.